Hi and welcome to Simply Balling's 2024-2025 season previews. It's that time of the year where for the next 30 days I'll be releasing a season preview for each team. In each preview there will be a quick season and off-season recap. Then following that we'll be looking at what's in store for each team. We'll be looking at some of the key questions that they have, some of the positives, some of the negatives. It will be digging deeper in some of those areas. And at the end there are some final thoughts with prediction of the standings, their floor, their ceiling, some of the playoff chances and some other fun predictions.
So today we're going through the Minnesota Timberwolves and what a difference can a year make. In 2023, when the Wolves traded for Rudy Gobert, a lot of the narratives was that it was one of the worst trades of all time, and they followed that by only winning 42 games and getting bounced in the first round. Then they turned everything around this year. They did end up third in the West, but this was also decided right at the end of the regular season, where they easily could have been a number one seed. And almost all of it came to the league best defense, where they were so dominant on that end that since 2001 they had the 12th best defense relative to league average. Combine that with Carlton Towns playing a lot more games, Edwards taking playing much better, and a full season of Mike Conley, and plenty of improvements from the rest of the team that also integrated in with Rudy to maximize him and how he can impact the defense. They went from a great defense to the best, and went from a bottom 10 offense to around average. And that's two things that is an easy recipe to win a lot more games. They started to make the core work after looking a bit off last year. In the playoffs, they took care of business. They didn't even make a series against the Phoenix Suns where they swept them. They didn't give up a single game to the Phoenix Suns that had Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. And that was rather surprising as well. That kind of came up as a shock. Then the series against Denver, they showed how good they can be. They showed that they can take care of business. They also showed that even against the backs against the wall, they can go on the roads in Denver and win games. Even when they were down by double digits at the half. They did go against the Mavericks in the conference finals, where their flaws kind of got emphasized and exploited a lot more, and it wasn't that much of a series. The two best players in Towns and Edwards offensively, they didn't really have it in that series. That was again the Mavericks doing a good job just taking them out of it. But regardless, they've shown that they are in the tiers of the contenders, and every contender has questions, and they did a good job throughout the playoffs addressing them and just going a step further. And you'd think they were going to run it back and be in that same spot at least again, where they can just at least look to go over the hump. And that just wasn't going to be the case. In the off-season, they just came out of nowhere and traded Carlton Towns for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. I had no idea that this was going to come. I thought this was going to be a relatively quiet off-season for them, just looking to improve around the margins, maybe make a deal at the deadline to just keep on improving them. But I thought they were going to at least see the score again after they made the conference finals. They had the questions that they needed to work on, so I was hoping that they could just address them and see after this season. But with the whole contract stuff, especially with Towns making supermax money, they just wasted no time on getting something in return that could give them a lot more flexibility. So that their addition is Randle, DiVincenzo, and a lottery pick in Rob Dillingham. That could be a swing for them, especially when it comes to just off the bench scoring. So right now they are heading into the season with a new core and a whole bunch of questions that right now needs to be addressed. So what's in store for the Wolves this year? It's another year of a potential Edwards leap. Will they continue to have the best defense in the league? Should they expect some decline from both Gobert and Mike Conley? Will they fix the 9 Gobert minutes, especially in the playoffs? How will the whole Randle and Gobert experiment work? Because that's going to bring a different dynamic to what they had with Towns. What can Randle add that they didn't have in Towns? Can Rob Dillingham have an impactful rookie season as a ball handler off the bench? And any potential jumps from Naz Reid and McDaniels and Alexander Walker? So Anthony Edwards is coming off an Olympics run, and we usually know what comes after that. It's a player coming in with a different mindset, different approach, and potentially takes a leap. It's him just being surrounded by all-time greats. You take things away from them and you add that to your game. Now, I haven't been entirely high on Edwards over the last 2 seasons. Some of the conversation around him has been kind of overrating him, especially as a scorer and a passer, and that's where the season lies. It's him making those necessary adjustments to be a much better scorer and a much better playmaker. because that's where some of his flaws show up, and that has showed up in the playoffs, where he's not a great decision maker yet. He hasn't been able to just pass at an elite level, and his scoring is still a bit too much of a pull-up jumping, not having an elite rim pressure or getting to the line as much. And we saw in the Olympics some of the shot selection and the pole pounding. He has still yet to be an average efficiency in any of his regular seasons. He's not an elite 2-point shooter. He has an inefficient shot diet with only 27% rim frequency, where he shoots 69%. So that should be a much higher frequency there. The finishing is elite, but we need some of the shot selection going away from those pull-up jumpers into the rim. That's why his effective field goal has been quite below average, though his scoring has been helped with the way he gets to the line. But a lot of it comes down when it comes to his playoffs. He improves a lot in the playoffs when it comes to his pull-up shooting. He's a career 35% shooter in the regular season, and that jumps to 49% in the playoffs. When it comes to 3-point shooting, his pull-up is 33% in the regular season, and that jumps to 38%. His long mid-range was 14 feet beyond the 14 feet inside the arc. He's 34% in the regular season and 54% in the playoffs. So a lot of those issues in the playoffs go away simply because he is a much better shooter. That's why he's seen as a playoff riser. But I don't see a change in his game, or whether it's him as a scorer or as a passer. He looks better because he shoots 20% better. But how much of that is just small sample size where there's not even enough sample size for those looks to even stabilize? Because we already have a much bigger sample of him being an average shooter. Even though he has improved each year, he hasn't improved to a level where he's shooting like KD. He may not be a 35% shooter anymore, but he's definitely not a 55% shooter. So that's where the question comes for me. And even beyond the actual shooting percentage, there is still some of the question marks about the actual frequency. Here are some of the percentage of his shots as pull-ups in his career. In the playoffs this year, it was 53% of his shots. In the regular season, that was 47. In 2023, in the playoffs, was 41. In the regular season, was also 41. So he's around 40% of his shots in the last two seasons has been pull-up shots, and in the playoffs that has increased as well. So there are some question marks when it comes to his shot selection and diet. Then you also add his passing relating to that shot selection, where he does settle for those shots instead of passing it to an open man. You can see a whole bunch of F's and D's across the board from a B-ball index when it comes to his playmaking stats. The volume isn't there. The shot quality is also not at elite level apart from this year. The playmaking talent is just nowhere near enough to what you'd need from a guy like that. Also note, this is compared to on-ball players. So guys that are meant to be a shot creator, meant to be the primary ball handler, he's not at the level to be the engine. And that's the leap that we should be wanting to see from Edwards this year. Related to the offense and the guards, it's Conley. He's going to be 37 years old. He has been very important for them, especially just as a point guard that can take off those primary ball handling duties from Edwards, can be a much better decision maker. He hasn't been turning the ball over at all, basically. He'd be first in touches on the Wolves per 36 minutes with 82. He has a 4.9 time of possession, which is also the same as Edwards. So he's sharing that load with Edwards. What's going to happen if we see a decline in him? Because he is 37 years old. At some point, he will have to have a reduced role, or the effectiveness will also drop. And one of the things we've already seen from him over the last 3 seasons is the drop off in rim pressure and foul drawing. He's now a 3-point shooter. Over 60% of his shots are now threes, which is a career high, and he's still an elite pull-up threat. He shot 45% on pull-up threes. Over 30% of his shots were almost at 1.37 points per shot. But again, he's going to be 37 years old. So is it reasonable to expect that kind of level of production at that kind of volume through 82 games and the playoffs? Because if he declines, that means Edwards will have to be pushed into that role? And if he doesn't take those necessary leaps, what is their offense with the guards going to look like? This is also a question for Rudy Gobert. He's 32 years old. He's a big 7-footer who has played consistently since 2015. At some point, all those games will pile up for a guy his size. He's been a DPOY candidate each year since 2015, so that will take a toll on you. We already seen some kind of declines in his metrics across the board. The level of dominance that he had in previous years are not there anymore. He's not having that kind of same impact, and some of it is context, some of it is being in a different team, but some of it is just him being much older. There's going to be a difference between being 26, 27 and a 32, 33 year old. But he's still needed. He's a big, important part for this team, especially on both ends of the floor throughout the season. He's a good screener, good finisher, and an elite defensive player that makes a lot of the defense work. That was one of the reasons why they got him in the first place. If he shows the declines, what do you do with him? He is up for an extension, so do you just give it to him, or is there a way to just get out of it? Is there a way to just give him on a nicer deal? Because he is still an effective player that raises the floor of this team and helps you in the playoffs. Now, I did had this whole preview done before the Towns and Randle trade, so there are some points that I wanted to make about the Towns, because I already had questions about their fit when it comes to just the two big lineups with Towns and Gobert. Now I wonder how that's going to fit with Randle, because Gobert and Towns were +9 in 324 minutes in the playoffs with a 121 offense. Can they replicate that with Randle? Because that's going to be now a bigger discussion. There were also many questions with Towns heading into the season, like what can we expect from him being a 29-year-old, where offensively he had all the skill set as a modern big, and yet there was still something that felt like he was missing. And then there was a lot of question marks on the defensive end. Those are some of the issues with Randle. He's going to add a bit different, but defensively there are some of the same issues with the motor as well, but he also gives you something he didn't have. And that leads us to the whole trade with Randle and Dante for Cat. That came kind of unexpected. I'm not sure if I was expecting any of this to happen, but with Towns gone, there's going to be a lot of questions with Randle and how he fits with both Edwards and Rudy Gobert. So there is a fit concern. That was already a concern, like we mentioned, with the double bigs, and that will continue to be a big concern, especially now with Randle and his lack of 3-point shooting, his worst off-ball play, because we already had these concerns with a best shooting big in the NBA. If that was a concern, this is going to raise more questions. On the other hand, Randle has also never played with a spacing big before, and yet it worked in New York. With both Randle and Hartenstein, the Knicks were +11 net with a 125 offensive rating, so it can work. He has never played with a shooting big. Mitch Robinson is not a shooting big. Anthony Davis is also not a shooting big, and yet the offense has always worked with those two on. Then there's the whole question of Randle and Edwards. Randle has played with a ball dominant guard in Brunson, and things still worked. That was one of the questions for the New York, where Brunson had such offensive load that they needed, that you could make a case that they needed Julius Randle to help him with that, bring another shot creator and a good passer to help with carrying the offensive load. That's now what Edwards is going to get, because that hasn't really been Towns, despite all the how he should fit offensively with all his off-ball skills, with his 3-point shooting and his passing. He still wasn't enough to help Edwards carrying the offensive load. So there is evidence that it could work with Edwards now. In the last 2 seasons with Randle and Brunson, they were plus 2.7 with a 121 offensive rating, where Randle averaged 25 points per 75 possession on 58% true shooting with a 28% usage. So it clearly can work. And it's going to be a question of, can it work with Edwards? Like, Randle is a good offensive player when it comes to just raising the floor of the ceiling. You can see he has good stats across the board. He's got good finishing over the years, good mid-range, good overall shooting talent, good mid-range pull-up game. His 3-point shooting is a bit up and down. His playmaking is average compared to on-ball players, but it's still good enough to ease the load off Edwards. In these 2 years without Brunson, he averaged over 29 points per 75 on 57% true shooting with 33% usage. So that's enough additional scoring that could help Edwards when he sits, and it could help him whenever he's off ball. So there are ways to make this work. Then there's whole DiVincenzo as well. He's on a great contract. He's a great pickup. He will provide a lot of off ball shooting next to both Edwards and Conley. That's why I love this trade even more for the Wolves. But it all depends how you see Dante. He was third in 3-point per 100 possession with over 15, and he shot over 40%. The combination of the volume and the efficiency is just insane. It's not only great for this season, it's historic. So the question is, was that a blip? Was that an outlier? Did the Knicks just sell at a perfect time or at a perfect season? Because he followed that in the playoffs as well. If he's not that kind of shooter, that does change a little bit. But if he can remain a 37 to 40% shooter on that kind of volume, it's still a big plus. Because the Wolves need shooting. They don't really have anyone else outside of Conley who's not a high volume shooter. Then there's the rest of the team that's equally as important now. This team was this good because of a collective effort. Their defense was strong from top to bottom. I really like what I saw from Nickeil Alexander Walker. He became a key rotational player where he was 7th in minutes per game and 6th in the playoffs. He has developed into a solid shooter at 39% on over 8 threes, but that did drop into 29% in the playoffs. Can he continue to just be consistent as a 3-point shooter to make the defense pay? Because he does bring secondary ball handling, shooting, and defense, and that was key throughout the playoffs. And I like what he could still develop into. There's McDaniels, who is another player that became very important, especially on the defensive end. He made our defensive team, and it was key in the matchup against Jamal Murray. But can he continue to develop offensively? That's what he's shown in the playoffs, where he had 4 games with 20 plus points. Not only was his 3-point shooting better, but he was putting the ball down a lot more, getting to the inside the arc, getting to the rim, and finishing well. Over the last 3 seasons, he has been shooting over 58% inside the arc on decent volume. So what is the potential with him offensively? That's the kind of question that will be important for the Wolves, because if they can just develop another wing next to Edwards, next to Randall, next to Gobert, that can be a really good defensive player and give them a lot more offensively, that can swing so much for them. Then there's the same thing with Naz. He was a 6th man of the year. He's a 6'9" big who shoots 41% on over 10 threes per 100 possession, though that is only up from 34% in previous 4 seasons. So again, was this just a blip or a legit improvement? Because that's going to make a big difference. Is he a mid-30s guy or is he a 40% guy? Because there will be times where the defense will look to make him pay, and they will be right. So it just how much of that can be consistent. But then how much of his role going to change now with no Towns? What are rotations with him? Is he going to be used in the same way as he was with Towns with Randall? Is he going to be used as a sole big? That's going to matter a lot this year to maximize Randall as well, because that's the whole point of bringing in Randall, who is a better driver, better passer, better shot creator for himself. How can he make it work with someone like Naz? Because that's more size in the front court. If they can have more shooting with like Conley and Dante, that could be a very good bench unit and give them a lot more flexibility. But that again depends on Naz's development, especially when it comes to just as a passer. He has a career 9% assist percentage, but also an 11% turnover. So there are still a bunch of questions offensively as well as the defense, because that wasn't the defense with him and Cat without Gobert in the playoffs was just atrocious. A lot of the issues were with them to just not cleaning it up, not rotating well, and that all needs to change for this year. Then there's the rookie Rob Dillingham, who is a huge bonus for a team that reached the conference finals and they added a top 8 pick. This could be a very good move if it pans out. If he comes in be a impactful player right away, that could change things for them. Depending on what his floor is and how quickly he can reach that, it could help with a potential Conley decline. I'm definitely going to be saying he's going to add what Conley does with his IQ, with his vet leadership, but it would be another reliable shot creator that they didn't have even with Conley. So his development could swing a lot of things for the Wolves if he develops into a reliable bench player right now. So predictions, I see them as a 50 to almost a 60 win team. The floor is a 6th seed and the ceiling is a top 3 seed. Before they made their trade for Randall, I said this was going to be a much better season for the Wolves, even with a potential drop off from Conley or Gobert. Even if Edwards doesn't take a leap as big as you might think, I still thought they were going to be a top 3 team. A reasonable improvement in Edwards was likely, and that alone would make me feel very comfortable with them. And with the playoffs, they already had a deep run that addressed some, that already exploited some of their weaknesses. That would have been another question for them throughout the year that I could just address. A team needs to experience those kind of losses to just get over the hump. So with another year of the core just working on those weaknesses, working on those flaws, I was really confident that they could easily make the NBA Finals. Now with the Randall trade, I'm going to lower some of the expectations. I don't think Finals or top seed is in their hands anymore. I think having that potential continuity was important, because now they still have similar issues. They still have the same issues that they would have had with Towns, but now they also added another question mark with Randall. They're adding more question marks with how that is going to work on both ends of the floor. Now there's a lot more unknown in both directions. What if Randall makes the whole thing worse? But then on the other hand, what if he comes back to an All-NBA level player offensively and improves the defense? So there are now a lot more question marks than there were before. So now, right now, this whole year is a wait and see. It's seeing how all of this is going to work. It's figuring out things on the go and seeing how it works in the playoffs. It's seeing what this score and what questions that this score has. And because of that, I can't see them make a deep playoff run the way they did last year, because it's just the first year into this core.